The fall of a noble daughter. The palace of Velkara glowed under the twin moons, carved from crystal and firestone. Its towers reached the sky, and its courts echoed with songs of power and pride. At the center of it all stood Celira, daughter of High House Vael, the youngest noble of the council, fierce in battle, elegant in court. Her silver robes shimmered like water, and her eyes held the sharpness of her ancestors. But tonight, the nobles were not singing her name. Tonight, they were laughing. She was dragged through the great hall in chains, her once beautiful gown, torn and dirty, her long black hair tangled and soaked with rain. Above her, the alien nobles sat on high thrones, cloaked in gold and arrogance. Their laughter echoed across the marble floor. She thought she could lead. A noble consorting with rebels? Let her clean the floors she once walked on. Celira kept her head high, even as guards shoved her to her knees. Her wrists bled from the shackles, but she didn't blink. She stared straight at her father. He did not look back. The High Lord stood, tall, cold, merciless. Celira of House Vael, he said, voice loud and empty. You are charged with betrayal, with speaking to the off-worlders, with questioning our rule. I sought truth, she answered. And justice, not lies. The court roared with laughter again. The High Lord raised his hand. Silence. You are no longer noble. You are no longer Vael. You are nothing. He turned, stripped her of title, cast her below. They took her to the underlevels that same night. Far beneath the shining palace, the air turned to rot. Cracked stone, cold tunnels, places where nobles never walked. She was thrown into a filthy room where broken tools and ragged slaves slept. Her chains were cut, but no freedom was given. She was a servant now, a thing. Days passed. Then weeks. Celira scrubbed walls with her bare hands, carried heavy stone, was spit on by the same nobles she once trained with. Her back ached, her fingers bled, but she never begged. She never cried. The other workers feared her at first. She spoke, like a noble, stood tall like a warrior. But they watched as she was beaten, and stayed silent. Watched as her old friends walked by one and said nothing. Eventually they began to whisper. She was one of them. But they turned on her. Maybe she really is nothing now. Then one day, everything changed. Tew was raining outside. Celira was scrubbing the side steps of the palace, a cruel joke from the guards. The very stairs she once walked with her head high. Now she cleaned them on her knees. Her arms shook. Her knees burned. The cold water soaked through her clothes. The nobles above walked past, laughing. She ignored them. But one figure did not walk past. He stopped. A man. Human. Wearing a worker's coat, carrying tools. He looked at her. Not with disgust. Not with pity. But with respect. She looked up sharply. What are you staring at? He blinked. You look like you could use help. She narrowed her eyes. Don't. They'll hurt you too. He knelt beside her anyway and pulled out a small cloth from his bag. Without a word, he began to scrub. Beside her, the guards nearby didn't notice. Yet, she hissed, Are you insane? He shrugged. Name's Micah. I fix palace walls, bad at staying quiet. I don't need saving, she said. I didn't say you did, he replied. But 2 hands clean faster than one. For a moment, she stared at him. Then, without smiling, she kept scrubbing, but slower now, beside him. That night, as she returned to the dark sleeping cell below the palace, she touched the cloth he had left her. It was still dry, still clean, for the first time in weeks. Her hands weren't bleeding. Far above in the noble tower, a pair of guards watched the recordings. Who's the human that touched her? One asked. The other grinned. Doesn't matter. If he tries that again, we'll make sure he never lifts another finger. The kindness that wasn't allowed. Celira didn't expect to see him again. She thought the human Micah was a fool. She thought he would disappear like the others who had tried to be kind only to be broken for it. But 2 days later she saw him again, and this time he brought bread. She was in the lower hall, sweeping ash from a broken furnace, her hands raw and her back stiff. The work was cruel on purpose. The nobles called it cleansing through shame. But no shame lived in Celera anymore. Just quiet rage and pain. She didn't hear Micah approach. She only noticed when a soft piece of cloth touched the stone beside her, wrapped inside, bread still warm. Her head snapped up. Micah stood in the shadow of a broken arch, eyes cautious, shoulders casual. "Stole it," he said softly. "Well, not stole, more like borrowed forever." She stared at the bread, then at him. "You'll lose your hands for this?" He shrugged. "If I do, maybe you can lend me yours." Celera didn't smile, but she didn't give the bread back either. Later, that night she sat alone in her cell chewing slowly. It was the first real food she'd tasted in weeks. Not gruel, not scraps. Bread. It reminded her of home, of her mother's kitchen before the throne halls, of mornings before power and pride, of a time when kindness wasn't a crime. The next morning, she returned to the ash furnace hall. Micah was already there, fixing the melted vents. She walked past him without a word, but as she passed, she dropped something near his foot. A single polished crystal, once part of her noble uniform, hidden in her ragged sleeve all this time. He picked it up, looked at her. She didn't look back, but she said, "Now we're even." That might have been the end of it. But fate had other plans. 3 days later, the guards found them talking. It wasn't a romantic moment. It wasn't rebellion. Just two workers, one once noble, one never meant to matter, talking softly behind the cooling vents, sharing silence between their words. That was all it took. The guards ripped Celera away, shouting. One raised his staff and screamed, "So you still think you're worth words, traitor?" She didn't resist, until the guard raised his hand again. This time he wasn't aiming to strike her back. This time, he aimed at her face. Micah moved without thinking. He stepped in front of her, and the metal rod slammed into his jaw. He dropped, to the ground instantly bleeding. "Touch her again," the guard snarled, "and we'll take your tongue." Micah coughed, wiped the blood from his lip, then looked up. His voice was hoarse. "Take mine instead." The guards froze. Celera did too. He meant it, every word. That night, Celera stood by Micah's bed in the infirmary. No one had come to visit him, not even the humans. He was nothing, less than nothing, but still, he had bled for her. She sat beside him and whispered, "Why?" His eyes opened slowly. "You looked like you needed someone to say you still matter." She stared at him. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said. "They all laugh when you pass, but you don't look down, that means something." She looked away. "You're a fool," he chuckled. "Yeah, but I'm your fool now." She didn't smile, but her eyes did, just for a second. In the council tower, the High Noble of Discipline reviewed the guard report. A small smirk curled on his lips. "So the fallen daughter has a protector now?" He sipped his wine. "Then let's see how far she'll fall when we take him next." Fire and broken bones. The punishment came before sunrise. Micah was dragged from the infirmary by his wrists, his wounds still fresh, his shirt soaked in blood. No one helped him. Not the guards, not the workers, not even the other humans. They had learned long ago, kindness was dangerous. Celera watched from the shadows of the lower hall as he was chained and taken toward the deep mines, a place even slaves feared. She had heard stories of dark tunnels without light, of old machines that broke bones faster than they mined stone, of workers who went in screaming and never came back out. "He saved me," she whispered to herself, her fists clenched. "And I did nothing." She returned to her quarters, rage burning inside her chest. There was no food that day, no sleep, only one thought. He had fire in his bones. And they broke it. But not all the way. That night, she snuck through old servant tunnels, paths only a true noble would know. Every turn was a memory, every crack a scar. She found the mines, found the guards, and slipped past them like a ghost. Took her hours to find him. He was barely awake, face bruised, his hands shaking from holding tools for too long. His skin was cut and blackened by stone dust, but when he saw her, he smiled. "Hey, I thought I dreamed you." "You didn't," she said. Micah tried to sit up, but failed. "Don't," she said, kneeling beside him. "Just breathe." "I was starting to think you'd left me," he said weakly. "I almost did," she whispered. "But I remembered what you told me, that I never looked down." She carried him through the shadows, step by slow step. They made it back to the old catacombs beneath the palace ruins, once used by nobles for war councils, now forgotten. She laid him down gently, wrapped his hands, and wiped the dust from his face. Then she stood and walked into the dark. She didn't stop walking until she reached the sealed vault beneath her, family's chamber. She hadn't been here since the trial, since her name had been ripped from the scroll of the nobility. But she still knew the code, still remembered the rhythm of the ancient locks. With trembling fingers, she touched the panel and whispered the old words. The vault opened. Inside, a single object stood, a black and silver armor suit, ancient battle gear, once worn by her mother, marked with the Vale family crest. Her fingers brushed the smooth metal, and for the first time since her fall, she felt like a daughter of fire again. She returned to Micah hours later. He was sitting up now, eyes half open. "You're back," he said. She dropped the folded battlesuit at his side. He blinked. "What's this?" "A memory," she said, "and a warning." He smiled faintly. "You planning something crazy?" "Yes." "Good," he said. "I've been waiting." Hook. Ending. Far above, the nobles gathered for a new ceremony. Another slave would be shamed. Another punishment given. But one guard burst in pale. "There's been a breach in the old vault," he said. The nobles laughed. "Let the rats play in the dust," one said. But the laughter stopped when he added, "The battlesuit of Lady Vale is missing. The noble no more." The next morning, the palace buzzed with tension. Guards doubled their patrols. Noble voices whispered in cold corners. Someone had broken into the old vault and taken a suit that was never meant to be worn again. Salira walked the stone corridors like a shadow, not in chains, not in rags, but in a stolen cloak, her mother's armor hidden beneath. She moved through tunnels beneath the throne hall, where cracks in the ceiling let in soft rays of light. Micah limped, behind her, still weak but alive. "This plan is mad," he whispered. "I know," she said. "I like it." She smiled without smiling. They waited until the nobles gathered in the grand hall for the morning judgment, a display of power meant to keep the weak quiet. Today's target was a young servant girl accused of breaking a glass tray. The nobles laughed. The guards brought the girl forward, and that was when the doors slammed open. Every eye turned. A figure stepped into the hall, tall, armored, and glowing with the silver fire of the old bloodline. The Vale crest burned bright across her. Chest gasp spread like lightning. "Is that—" "No, it can't be. It's her. Salira." She walked to the center of the hall, alone, then pulled back her hood, her eyes locked on the High Lord. "I invoke blood right," she said loudly, "by the old laws, the laws your family used, to rise. I demand a challenge." The room froze. Micah stood just behind her, leaning against the wall, watching everything. He had never seen her like this before. Tall, unbroken, powerful. The High Lord stood slowly, You are no longer noble, he said. You cannot invoke anything. I was born Vielle, she answered, and your own seal allowed those born into high houses to issue blood challenge, even in disgrace. He narrowed his eyes. You want revenge? I want truth, she said, and the right to speak before the people again. A low murmur spread. Blood right hadn't been used in decades because no one had dared. Until now. A noble general stepped forward. Let me fight her. End this quickly. The High Lord nodded. So be it. The crowd parted. Celira stepped into the center. So did the general, twice her size in full battle armor, laughing. She didn't flinch. When the bell rang, he charged, swinging hard, heavy, arrogant. Celira dodged once, then again, then spun under, his blade, and brought her elbow into his side. His breath caught. She struck again. Faster this time, sharper, until his armor cracked, until he fell, hard, and didn't get up. The crowd was silent. Then another noble stepped forward. I'll fight. And fell. Then a third. 3 opponents, 3 victories, 1 woman, once cast aside, now standing tall again. Celira raised her voice. Your laws are broken. Your pride is poison. But I remember what we were before power made us blind. She turned. To the crowd. To the ones below, do you hear me? I was dragged through these halls in chains, but I am still here. And I will not bow again. Micah stepped beside her. For the first time, no one stopped him. The High Lord's hand gripped his throne. Tight, too tight. Enough, he growled. You have your challenge. Your voice. What more do you want? Celira stared him down. Your lies exposed. Hook ending. The High Lord didn't answer. Instead, he clapped twice. The ground shook. A door opened at the edge of the hall, and out stepped a tall warrior, face hidden behind a helmet. He moved like a machine. Faster, colder, stronger. The nobles cheered. Micah's eyes widened. Celira, that's not just a guard. She turned slowly and whispered, That's my brother. The rise before the roar. The crowd was quiet now. No more laughter. No more cheers. Just the heavy sound of armored footsteps as the helmeted warrior stepped forward. His armor was black, lined with red veins of power. His movements were smooth. Too smooth. Like something not fully alive. Controlled. Programmed. Celira's breath caught in her throat. Her voice was barely a whisper. Alan, her brother, her blood, her only family before the nobles tore her name from the wall and left her in the dirt. He had vanished during the early days of the rebellion, declared dead by the High House. But he wasn't dead. He had been taken. Rebuilt. Twisted. Now, he stood before her as a weapon. The High Lord smiled from his throne. You wanted justice, fallen daughter? He said, voice calm. Then face the ghost of your past. Let your own blood decide your fate. Micah stepped forward, tense. You don't have to fight him. Celira's eyes didn't leave the warrior. He won't stop unless I stand. But what if... She tightened her gloves. Then I'll fall on my feet. The challenge circle opened once again. The nobles gathered close, eager to see her crushed. Micah watched from the side, fists clenched. He couldn't help her here. No words. No shield. This was Celira's fight. The bell rang. Her brother charged, faster than the others. He swung a plasma blade toward her chest. She barely blocked it in time. Sparks flew. She spun back, trying to create distance. Alan, she shouted. It's me. No response. He attacked again, relentless. Each blow was stronger than the last. She stumbled, rolled, dodged, but he didn't stop, not even for a second. The crowd cheered again, but this time, not all of them. Some of the younger nobles looked uncertain. Some of the workers watching through hidden vents had gone quiet. This didn't look like a fair challenge. This looked like a message. Celira blocked another hit. Barely. Her shoulder burned. Her arms shook. She fell to one knee. Alan raised his blade. She looked up into his helmet. "Do you remember?" she gasped. "The night Mother died? The stars over the river?" The blade paused, just for a second. Long enough for her to see it. A flicker in his stance. A tremble in his hands. She stood. Didn't raise her blade. Didn't defend. Just opened her arms and said softly, "If you kill me, let it be as your sister, not your target." Alan stepped forward. Blade still raised. The nobles shouted, "Strike her down. End this farce." "She has no right to speak." But Selira didn't move, and Micah didn't look away. He whispered, "Come on, come back to her." Then Alan's hand began to shake. Harder. His breathing changed. The blade dropped an inch. Then another. Then clang. It hit the floor. The crowd gasped. Alan tore off his helmet. His face was pale, marked with control nodes, his eyes filled with tears. "Selira," he whispered. What have they done to me?" She ran to him, held him, like she did when they were children and the world felt small. The High Lord stood furious. "You dare defy your orders?" Alan turned to him and shouted, "You took my mind. You stole her name. You built a kingdom on broken bones." The chamber shook with his voice. "For the first time," someone shouted back. From the walls above, workers began to cheer. From the servant halls, rebels stepped forward, weapons hidden no more. Micah rushed to Selira's side. "You started something," he said, eyes wide. "No," she answered, gripping her brother's hand. "We started it." The nobles tried to run, but it was too late. The fire had already begun, and the roar was rising. As guards dropped their weapons and workers stormed the halls, the High Lord backed into his throne and whispered, "I should have crushed her when I had the chance." Selira stepped forward, her eyes like fire. "You did." She raised her blade, and I rose from the ashes, breaking the crown. The great hall burned with light and voices, not from fire but from freedom. Nobles shouted. Guards fled. The polished floors were stained with the truth as slaves, workers, and silent watchers rose up together. But Selira wasn't done. Not yet. The High Lord still sat on his throne, eyes cold, lips curled with fury. He hadn't run, because men like him never believed they had to. He stared at Selira, bloody, bruised, standing tall with her brother and Micah by her side. "You think this chaos means victory?" he sneered. Selira stepped forward. "No, but it means change," he scoffed. "You think anyone will follow a traitor covered in dirt?" Alan raised his voice. "They'll follow the truth." Micah scanned the edges of the hall. More workers were entering now. Some had never spoken aloud before this day. Some had been silent for years. Now they marched with tools turned into weapons, their heads high, not shouting, just walking forward. And that scared the nobles more than any scream. The High Lord stood. With a flick of his hand, a small device rose from the floor, a throne command trigger. One press could activate the hidden defense network, turrets, walls, seals, and bombs. "No one leaves," he hissed. "I'll bury us all before I kneel to filth." But before he could press it, crack. A single stone from the upper ledge flew and struck his hand. He dropped the device. It rolled down the steps and landed near Micah's foot. He picked it up, then looked to Selira. She didn't need to speak. Micah crushed the device under his boot. The crowd roared. The High Lord backed away. He looked smaller now. Not royal, just old. Tired. Beaten. Selira climbed the steps toward him, one step at a time. No blade in her hand. Only her voice. "I knelt before this. Thrown in chains," she said. "I was spit on, broken, forgotten." She stood in front of him now, and I rose. He laughed bitterly. "What do you want? To sit here? Wear a crown?" Selira looked down at the throne, then turned away. No, that seat poisoned every soul who touched it. She looked to the people. "We will build new ones, lower, wider, with room for all." Someone shouted, What do we do with him? All eyes turned back to the High Lord. Salira did too. She stared at him and then said simply, "Let him live. Let him see what happens when the people remember their worth." The nobles were stripped of title, the golden banners torn down. The palace became something new, not a place of orders, but a place of rebuilding. In the days that followed, Salira met with voices from every corner of Velkara: workers, soldiers, farmers, healers, children. She didn't speak to them as a ruler. She listened. Micah stood beside her, quiet, always watching. He fixed the damaged halls, carved new paths, opened old vents to let the light in. One day, while walking the eastern garden, he turned to her. "You did it," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "We did." "No," he said with a grin. "I just handed you bread. You brought down a kingdom." She smirked. "That was very good bread." He nudged her shoulder. "You never said thank you." "I didn't have to," she said softly. "You stayed." That night she stood at the top of the outer walls overlooking the same city that had once laughed as she was dragged away. Now she heard music in the streets, saw lanterns float into the sky. Her people, free. Her brother stepped beside. So, what now?" She took a deep breath. "We rebuild, we protect, and we remember." Far across the stars, in a shadowed council room, other alien houses watched the footage. One said, "Salira of Vale has returned." Another hissed, "Then the age of noble blood may end faster than we feared." But one voice whispered, "No, it may begin again, in a better way." The woman who stood again. A year had passed. Velkara was no longer a world ruled by fear. The banners of old noble houses were gone. In their place stood symbols of unity, simple flags with a circle and two hands, one human, one Velkaran. People laughed in the streets now. Children ran free near the palace walls once lined with guards, and at the center of it all, Salira stood tall, not as a queen, not as a noble, but as a leader chosen by the people. They called her the woman who stood again. She didn't wear armor anymore, only simple robes marked with her family's crest, but no crown, no throne. She walked among the people, ate with them, listened. Her brother, Alan, now helped rebuild the law halls, teaching others how justice should feel, not just how it should sound. And Micah? He never left. He lived beside Salira in a small stone house near the East Gardens. He built benches, repaired old wiring, and grew terrible vegetables that she pretended to enjoy. Every morning, they walked through the fields. Every night, they shared silence beneath the stars. Peace had no loud words, just steady ones. One day, a group of children from both species ran up to her in the garden square. "Lady Salira, is it true?" One asked. "You were a slave?" Another gasped. "Did you fight the High Lord yourself?" A younger one whispered, "Did you really lose everything?" Salira knelt in front of them. "Yes," she said simply. "I lost everything, even myself." "Then how did you come back?" one asked. She turned and looked at Micah, who was fixing a lamp nearby. She smiled softly. "I didn't come back alone." Later that evening, she and Micah sat under the stars, their hands brushing. He spoke first. "I used to think I was just some worker, a human lost in another empire. Nothing important." She looked at him. "And now?" He chuckled. "Now I know the smallest choices change the biggest things." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You gave me bread when I hadn't eaten, stood up for me when I had no name. That wasn't small." He looked at her. "I gave you a moment," he said. "You gave me everything." That night, Salira walked once more to the place where it all began, the throne room, empty now, quiet, no gold, no guards, just stone. She stood where she had been dragged in chains. She remembered the laughter, the shame. She stood there in silence. Then she whispered, "I am still here." She placed one hand on the cold floor, then rose. Stronger, still standing. On a quiet world far away, another young girl sat in front of a screen, watching an old archive. She saw a woman, once shamed, now standing before crowds of both alien and human. The girl looked up at her mother and said, "She was so brave." Her mother smiled. "Yes, and not because she fought." Then why? Because when the galaxy laughed at her fall, she still chose to rise.